The turmoil in Treasuries. What in the heck is happening in the bond market? What's happening with interest rates? It seems counterintuitive and it's super crazy. I don't know about you, but my inbox and my news feeds are just stuffed full of articles, reports on the bond market. And why is it in turmoil and chaos, and what does it mean? I mean, it's probably consuming more than 2/3 of my content that I receive. And typically, I don't love to comment on the market because I like staying in my lane. There's plenty of other experts and analysts out there, economists, that are much better at this than I am. But I'm compelled to talk about it today because I was listening to a podcast over the weekend with two brilliant mortgage professionals having a really good conversation and sharing some terrific scripts. But at one point, the sales leader was talking about their scripts around buy downs, and buy downs are perfect tools today, wonderful vehicles to help people get homes. But what scared me is in the script, what he was suggesting is, look, we explained how to do a buy down to the buyer, and we said that could help with affordability today. And then we reassured them that, as we all know, interest rates are going to get better in the next 6 to 12 months. So we really only have to build a bridge for that long until we get to a better interest rate. And that really scared me because I don't believe that to be true. It could be true, it could, but it very well cannot be true. And we have to be super careful about our advice. While I think a lot of our value is providing valuable advice, we have to be careful that our advice is somewhat accurate. And in this case, we have to step cautiously. And now let me put this into perspective. And this may offend some of us, and I'm not meant to offend anybody, but what was probably one of the probably the most popular slogans we used over the last few years? Date the rate, marry the house. How has that worked? If you help somebody get into a house at 7% 3 years ago, their house value is flat, might even lost a little bit of value, interest rates are flat. How's that date going? That date's pretty long right now. That date's 3 years long. My guess is you didn't promise a 3-year dating period when you suggested date the rate, marry the house. Now, it's not a bad slogan, and it's a good thing to suggest, but what was probably risky is suggesting that rates were going to move that quickly. And now, right, they're back to the same place 3 years later. And, those people's income could be constrained. The value is probably flat or even maybe less, and interest rates haven't meaningfully improved. They're still dating that rate, man. They're probably common law married, and so we have to be careful sometimes what we say. So, excuse me. Let's talk about what's going on with interest rates, and I'm gonna share just 3 articles out of a gazillion. So bear with me if you would. Let me bring one up and we will get to it. I'm first going to talk about the basis trade. And to do that, I am going to share an article from Dr. Torsten Schlock from Apollo. He's the chief economist. He's probably one of my favorite economists, and I quote him all the time. But he's asking, what is the basis trade? So one of the things that they think's happening that's disrupting the bond market is the basis trade is unwinding. And here's what the basis trade is. And once again, I'm not trying to act like an expert, but it's the difference between a Treasury security and a Treasury futures contract. And what it says a lot of times, the way that broker dealers inject liquidity into the market is they future it by Treasury futures, and and the problem is there's a spread between the Treasury security and Treasury futures, and it could be up to 100 basis points. Well, if that spread gets squeezed, what happens is those broker dealers want to sell their futures, and you go, well, what's the big deal with that? Well, the big deal is that, the big deal is that they buy those futures at 100x leverage, right? And so there's about $800 billion right now in Treasury futures. And that's $800 billion out of the outstanding total prime brokerages of $2 billion. So it's a lot. So when they get freaked out, they start dumping these futures into the market. They're going to end up with at 100x leverage. It really washes over the market, and it depresses it depresses interest rates to where it forces it to raise the yield to attract somebody to get to that. Now that's the first point. I know I didn't do a great job of explaining that. But check out, you can just look up, what is a basis trade? But that's only one thing's happening. There's three different conditions that are affecting interest rates. And I'm gonna use another article here. This has been a great one. This is from right here. This is from Adam Tooze from the Chart Book. He's another leading economist. And he says, look, there's three things that have happened in the market that we have to understand that's destabilizing interest rates or treasuries. Here's the first thing. The first thing is if you remember in 2020, the market behaved this way. And what's really counterintuitive is that typically when the stock market, shoots down, there's a flight to security into bonds. And so typically that oversupply, right, creates the prices to go down or rates to go down, right? Makes sense. Bonds are just supply and demand. If you need to attract more buyers, you need to raise the yield. If you have a ton of supply, then the yield falls down because people are trying to get rid of their treasuries. So typically there's a flood to treasuries and bonds go down. Great. So why then, when the market has steep sell-offs, would the bond market have the same thing? Well, the reason is when the stock market really has sharp sell-offs, what happens is all these traders need to cover their hedges, and they need to cover their margin calls. They need to cover their spreads. And the only thing they can really sell is the most liquid thing they have is treasuries. So they're actually, instead of a mass consumption of treasuries, there's a mass dumping of treasuries, which puts, once again, a ton of pressure on yield because in order to attract enough buyers, you have to have a higher yield. And so that forces bonds prices to go up, if that makes sense. So first you have the basis point trade. Second, you have, all these dealers having to cover their margin calls, all these things, right? So second thing, but here's the third thing. Here's the scariest thing. And I'm going to share a third article, and this is from Bloomberg, and this is a really good article. And this is the thing I want to kind of alert everyone to, and then we're going to talk about it. Because this is the thing that is really the unknown, truly unknown. And this is from Bloomberg from today. The title of the article is "Why Wouldn't China Weaponize Its $760 billion in Treasury Holdings?" Makes sense, right? And so the idea is that foreign countries are getting angry at the U.S., and so they're going to take their investments out of the U.S., whether it's in currency or in bonds, and they're going to go take it someplace else. It could be gold. It could be buying other countries' currency. It could be buying other countries' bonds, right? Or debt. And one of the problems is because Germany now that is having to take a large deficit for the first time in order to rearm its country is going to issue a ton of debt, which is going to be very attractive to international buyers. Well, if we have other countries buying a ton of, say, Germany's debt or anyone else's debt and not ours, all of a sudden we have a weakening demand, and so we have to raise prices to attract the demand, to attract the buyers, right? And so then it even gets scarier in this article, as you can see. So China has $760 billion in treasury. Japan has $1 billion, right? Both of them can totally sideswipe our markets. And so here's what Beijing's rattling its sword, saying it will go all in on fighting against our latest 125% Trump tariffs, and that they're going to fight to the end, right? And so what happens here, as you see, last week we had some of the sharpest moves in the bond market, right? It was during Asia hours of trading, and there was speculation that Beijing was in the market, that they were weaponizing treasuries and debt and U.S. dollars, and they were dumping its holdings, which is what really drove the market. And so here's the thing. The Treasury Department needs to sell $2 trillion of new debt this year. Plus, they need to roll over $8 trillion. So they have $10 trillion this year they need to sell in treasuries. And it only takes a little teeny bit for some other country or some holder of treasuries to start dumping them to totally disrupt the market. And so, plus, on top of that, what you're really having is you're having countries like China go to a flight to gold from our dollars, and that's causing a ton of problems. As a matter of fact, the share of global reserves in U.S. dollars declined 58% year over year from last year. That's a ton, right? And then as you can see in this next paragraph, China keeps adding gold for its reserves for a fifth straight month, which is really helping drive up the price of gold. And so the article just goes on to see, as you see my highlights, that they really think that China is going to weaponize their dollar and treasury holding. All right, so we roughly covered the three things that are affecting bonds. I'm not trying to be an expert, and I'm not trying to pretend to be an expert. I did write an article on this and posted it in LinkedIn. The purpose of my article, and I'll show it to you right now, the purpose of my article was... here's a copy of it, and I'll put a link to my article below. But the purpose of my article is just to kind of summarize these points. And as you can see, probably if you get to the bottom of the article, I put links to quite a few articles. I put them throughout my the article, so you can click to links. But here's the thing. The whole point of my message today is tread carefully in suggesting, hey, let's get you in the house today because we're going to be able to refinance you in 6 months. Or we're going to refinance you in 12 months. We don't know that. No, I don't care who you are. You might be the best economist in the world. You have no idea where interest rates are headed. Now, longer term, definitely think there's downward pressure longer term. But longer term isn't 6 to 12 months. Anything can happen in the next 6 to 12 months. There is so much volatility. There's so much unknown. It's crazy. And so let's tread carefully. And so we have to be really careful as advisors. I strongly believe that home ownership is still the very best thing for most Americans, not only to have quality of life, but to create wealth, regardless of the interest rate environment, right? And we have to solve for affordability. Let's just be careful. Let's deal with the reality we have. Let's be great advisors. Let's have solutions. Let's help people get into homes, but let's not overpromise, and let's not suggest things that we don't know to be true. Now, one last thought on this, and then I'll wrap it up. In 2020, when we had this total unwinding of the basis trade, and right being the pandemic, I don't remember, interest rates shot up. The bond market was really breaking, and the Fed had to rush in and backstop the market. They backstopped the market by buying $100 billion in treasuries a day. They actually bought, in the worst week, they bought $1.5 trillion in 1 week to backstop the market. And it was, it was rumored that they were getting ready to do that last week. That's how much turmoil there was. But before they did that, President Trump removed the most recent, round of tariffs. He put a 90-day pause on it, and that reassured the market. And so the Fed didn't have to step in. Now, here's the thing. We can't just assume the Fed will jump in and backstop the market, because at some point the Fed loses its ability to sell debt, and it can't be the only buyer of debt, because then you get massive inflation, and that causes all sorts of problems. So we can't say, yep, all this can happen, but don't worry, the Fed will step in and save us. We have to be super cautious, but all of it is really fascinating, and it's interesting to watch. Now, me, I believe we need to control what we can control. So do exactly that. Help advise people the best. Help people get into houses today. Help them, get the benefit of extra inventory, a little less competition, more concessions. Wages are going up, hopefully faster than home prices, and so affordability is getting fixed. But let's not sell them on the, hey, we're going to redo this in 6 or 12 months. Now, do I hope that happens? Of course. Do I know that's going to happen? No. So, check out my article on LinkedIn. See if you find it interesting. Hopefully it will help. There's plenty of other people that are experts on this, that are talking about this. I know Barry talks about it. If you at all get any news on the markets, you're getting inundated, just pay attention to it. Reassure your clients, in the end, long term, United States is super healthy. We're probably going to see better rates down the road. I just don't know when that is. I hope you got something out of that. I hope you're going to have a great day and a good week. Thanks so much for giving me a few minutes of your time. I look forward to talking to you again soon. Thanks.